Hello, everyone, and welcome to On the Clock with the St. Louis Sports Commission. I'm your host, Tod Blackstock. In studio today with us is the Director of Communications and New Media for the St. Louis Sports Commission, Mr. Brent Shulman. Brent, thanks a lot for joining us.
Thanks for having me, Todd.
Heck, it's 2012 right now, and we're like rolling through the year. We have a huge March coming up, stuff it's unbelievable, but the Sports Commission is coming off a pretty neat event, and I know you'd like to share that with us right now.
Absolutely. Back in January, we had the St. Louis Youth Sports Summit, and our foundation, our sportsmanship initiative, headed by Solomon Alexander. You know, it's very focused on sportsmanship and kids programs and making sure people, you know, have the right role in sports, whether it's a coach, a referee, a parent, a league administrator, you know, making sure everyone stays focused and kind of stays in their role.
One thing, I was reading something from Solomon recently. He does a lot of the best sportsmanship things, this and that. He put together a little thing, the top 10 worst sportsmanship moments. I thought that was a good read. Is there any way people can get a hold of that or take a peek at that? And can you give an example of it? Absolutely.
You know, Solomon's been doing this now for the third year. You know, he puts together the top 10 list, and you know, there are some examples of a coach. Actually, it was a parent, a hockey parent, who was upset about his kid not getting enough playing time. You know, so he, you know, punched the coach. And, you know, there's just different examples of that kind of across sports. And that's kind of the whole initiative here, you know, with the Youth Sports Summit. You know, this year, Scott Highmark was the keynote for it. You know, it was out at Maryville University. We had over 200 coaches and parents. You know, it's just a morning and an afternoon kind of to improve youth sports kind of throughout the St. Louis area.
You know, talking about Scott Highmark, I'm thinking of the glory days, recent glory days at St. Louis University when Scott Highmark and, you know, the squad they had over there, Erwin Claggett, and, you know, played under Charlie Spoonhauer with Larry Hughes and the gang. And now St. Louis U has come back and, you know, they're on the national stage. There was some really big wins recently.
Absolutely, Todd. You know, like you said, you know, they've had some really big wins, and, you know, hopefully they'll be tournament bound this year.
You know, and with the success Mizzou's having right now, you know, I'm thinking, you know, we don't really have a pro basketball team in St. Louis, but heck, we have a lot of great basketball with SLU doing great this year and Rick Majerus doing a wonderful job turning that program around. And Frank Haith, I mean, I don't think anybody thought Mizzou was going to be as good as they are this year. And there's a lot of great basketball to be played here in St. Louis.
There really is, Todd. And like you said, you know, we have a huge month of March coming up, but, you know, there's a lot of basketball to still be played here in February. And, you know, Frank Haith done a great job down in Columbia with that program. And, you know, next year he has a bunch of new recruits coming in, his guys that, you know, he recruited.
So we'll see how that goes. Well, I know you're very excited about March coming up. First of all, we have the Missouri Valley Conference Tournament, which is always a great tournament. Could you maybe highlight some of the top teams coming out of the Missouri Valley this year, who to look for, and discuss the tournament and how to get a hold of tickets?
Sure, Todd. You know, Missouri Valley Conference, you know, they do such a great job with their tournament every year at Scottrade Center. You know, Doug Elgin and his team over there at the Valley. You know, it's a very balanced conference this year. You know, you have a lot of top teams. You know, hopefully they'll get multiple bids this year. You know, but Creighton seems to be leading the pack right now. And, you know, Doug McDermott has a shot to be National Player of the Year. And, you know, he's the coach's son and just his lights out so far this year.
Right. And so when will that's going to be taking place, it looks like in early March.
March 1st through 4th. It's at Scottrade Center. It starts a couple games Thursday night, and it continues through the weekend. Archmadness.com is the best way to get tickets. You can also get seats through your school's allotment. You know, call your school's athletic office and get tickets that way too.
And then 1 week after that is the women's tournament, and that's going to be held out again at the St. Charles Family Arena. How important is the women's tournament coming in a week behind, and how important is it for the regional exposure to bring St. Charles into the mix?
It's very important, Todd. You know, we like to, you know, the Sports Commission and the Valley and every other company here in St. Louis, you know, they like to make sure it's kind of spread throughout the region. You know, we like to have events in other places as well, other than the downtown area. You know, so it's important for the Valley, they think, to, you know, keep it in the St. Charles area, keep it off of a campus, to keep it kind of fair. You know, make sure that everyone has an equal chance, and have a good time with it.
And once again, we're hosting a regionals here. I guess in 2010 we had Michigan State go through St. Louis to make it to the Final Four. That was a great tournament. We had Ohio State and Northern Iowa made that big run, Tennessee and Bruce Pearl when he was still there. Talk about that year and then maybe what to expect this year down at the Dome.
Yeah, 2010, you know, we couldn't have asked for 3 better games at the Dome. You know, all games came down to the final possession or two. And, you know, it was terrific. You know, this year we expect to be much of the same. Obviously, we won't know until the week before who's going to be here. You know, but we could possibly end up with a Mizzou or a Kentucky combination of the two, maybe Kansas, some of the teams that travel very well, we'd be very happy with.
That'd be great. Now, the Missouri Valley is usually host these events, but they're kind of mixing it up this year, and St. Louis University is going to try out hosting big-time national tournament this year. What do you expect from St. Louis University, and will it be any different, or kind of the same type situation?
I don't expect it to be any different at all. St. Louis University, they're very pros over there, and they do a great job with all of their events, and I think they'll do a great job as host for this regional. It's just, St. Louis Sports Commission is doing our part, kind of with the community awareness, getting everyone involved. But it's going to be a great job, and it's going to be at the Edward Jones Dome, March 23rd and 25th. It's a Friday, Sunday, and the best way to get tickets for that is through ncaa.com/tickets or ticketmaster.com.
So will they be at tickets? It won't be to the lottery system or anything like that. Because when you get to the Final Four and the national championship, it gets to be a pretty tough ticket, but there's a pretty good chance to get seats for this event.
Exactly. With the Final Four, like you said, the lottery system where, most of the tickets are sold a year in advance other than the school allotments. For a regional, there's tickets available right now in the system. There's good seats available, and then there's kind of tickets held back for the schools that'll be here, they'll be notified kind of 5 days before once they win their second round games.
Fantastic. So we're looking forward to that, and there's always volunteers needed. Right now is probably the time if you want to volunteer for the event, or maybe get involved at some point. Right now is probably a good time to contact people down, I guess, through St. Louis University to see if you're going to need ushers and people to help out with some of the events during that weekend.
Absolutely. There's many volunteers needed for all of our events and all of, like you said, the regional. So you can contact SLU, you can contact our office. Our number is 345-5100. So that's the best way to get a hold of us. You can always check us out on our website, stlsports.org.
Now we're going to switch gears a little bit here. In between the Missouri Valley Tournament and the regionals here, we've got another major NCAA championship coming to town, and it's one that St. Louis hosts quite frequently.
Absolutely. It's the NCAA Division I Men's Wrestling Championship down at Scottrade Center, March 15 through 17. And like you said, it's very frequent here to St. Louis. Hosted it now 6 times since 2000, and it's a really, really big event for our region. It's with 6 sessions, we're going to have over 100,000 people total, at those 6 sessions. And, it's a really big event, 330 student athletes all competing for a national championship. There's the team championship, and there's also the individual championships for each weight class. So it's a really big deal, really big boost for downtown and the region, and we're really looking forward to it.
And it seems like with St. Louis having it 6 times out of the last 12 years, what is St. Louis doing different than everybody else? Why do we keep getting this event?
Todd, with all of our events, we focus on kind of the athlete experience and, the hospitality experience for the media and for the coaches and for kind of everyone involved with the process. We want to make it kind of the best experience ever, out of the venue also. So we want to make sure that, the hotels are kind of up to par with everything and, within walking distance of the arena, which always helps, which a lot of other cities don't have. So, the restaurants are close. And, all the athletes and coaches have all said, keep it in St. Louis. We want to come to St. Louis, if not every year, every other year.
Now, that's all going to be taking place in March, but you're still working on other events throughout the year. And I know you've got some gymnastics and some other things. Before we let you go, 2 more questions. Will the gymnastics events be coming back to St. Louis, and what's in store in the future?
Yes, the Visa Championships will be here in June. It's June 7th through 10th. That'll be at Chaffetz Arena. It's a tremendous event. I was able to see it in St. Paul last year. It's going to be part of deciding who's going to be on the Olympic team for London. The Olympic trials will be later next summer out in San Jose. But the Visa Championships will have, your Shawn Johnsons, your Jordan Wiebers, and kind of the other premier athletes, in the sport.
Wow. Before we let you go, I have to ask this. In the next 3 years, the Rams are giving away 1 home game each year to play in London. It's not mixed up. It's not like 1 year on, 1 year off. 3 home games, and we're trying to improve the Dome, and we need that money. How big of a blow is that to the RCGA and, the committee's trying to raise money to improve the stadium to lose those games?
It's 1 game a year. And, obviously everyone wants to have as many home games here as possible, but I think it's a good opportunity for the Rams to kind of have the national exposure, to have that game in London. I know the last several years with the Saints playing in it last year and several other teams the last couple years, they've said that they've got, so much exposure from the event and just, a new fan base kind of internationally. So, I think it's a good opportunity for the city and for the team.
Maybe they can sell some Steven Jackson jerseys in London now, huh?
Maybe.
All right. Well, Brent, thank you very much once
Thanks
again for joining us. All right. That's On the Clock with the St. Louis Sports Commission. We're about to hit OT. Thanks a lot for watching. We'll see you next time.